The ballroom at the Langston Grand shimmered like a jewel box, golden chandeliers dripping from the ceiling, marble floors gleaming under the rhythmic steps of designer shoes. Every detail whispered wealth, influence, and secrecy. It was the annual Aurelius Foundation Gala, where billionaires smiled through teeth too white and talked in circles sharper than the knives on their dessert plates. A place where stories were told with eye contact, not words. Where deals were made under candlelight and betrayal was always dressed in silk. Julian Hart stood at the center of it all. 42. Sharp jawline. Perfectly calculated 5 o'clock shadow. A tuxedo tailored to precision, not a wrinkle in sight. He wasn't just the host. He was the crown jewel of the night. Media mogul. Real estate tycoon. The kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone else's presence feel optional. He didn't chase fame, it gravitated to him. For a decade, Julian had kept his empire spotless. No tabloid scandals. No leaked affairs. No public outbursts. Every move was curated, controlled, contained, until that night. The disturbance began with nothing more than a ripple. A murmur by the entrance. A few turned heads. A confused waiter paused mid-step. And then, silence. She couldn't have been older than 6. A little girl in pink sneakers, jeans with cartoon patches on the knees, and a slightly oversized hoodie that looked borrowed from someone who hadn't planned on letting her out of their sight. No name tag. No adult in sight. She walked across the ballroom with all the defiance of someone who didn't know they weren't supposed to belong. Julian barely noticed her at first. Another guest's kid, maybe. A staff member's mistake. But the room noticed. Eyes locked on her like she was a ghost no one invited. She weaved through towering heels and pressed suits until she stood directly in front of him. Julian looked down, offering the kind of polite half-smile rich men reserve for uncomfortable surprises. Hey there, sweetheart. You lost. But she didn't look up with awe. She looked up with recognition. She pointed at his left hand. At the platinum ring that sat beside his Rolex. My mom has a ring just like that. The sentence hit like a shot glass dropped on marble. Small. Sudden. Shattering. Julian froze. The ring. One of a kind. Hand-forged in Paris. Not sold. Not copied. Not public. A design created with her in mind. The only other one was given to someone he'd spent a decade trying to forget. His throat tightened. What did you say? He asked, voice lower now. Cautious. The girl blinked, as if confused by his sudden change in tone. My mom wears one just like it. She says it's from a man who disappeared, but she still keeps it, even though he broke her heart. Julian's blood turned to ice. He turned, almost instinctively, and then he saw her, standing at the far edge of the crowd, frozen in place. The gala lights flickered off, the tear beginning to form at the corner of her eye. Amelia. The woman he once loved more than anything. The woman he left without warning. The woman now standing beside a daughter he didn't know existed. Julian couldn't move. The air in the ballroom had thickened into syrup. The music, once elegant and flowing, now sounded distant, like a memory struggling to stay alive. People were watching, whispering. But he didn't see them anymore. All he saw was Amelia, and a little girl with her eyes. 10 years ago, he had walked out of Amelia's life without a word. No letter. No goodbye. Just silence. She had been his anchor, his softness, and a life forged from ambition and endless forward motion. They met in a bookstore, cliché, maybe, but unforgettable. She'd been sitting cross-legged in an aisle, surrounded by poetry books, and looked up with the kind of smile that made him feel like a man before he was a mogul. She loved sunflowers. Hated elevators. Sang off-key in the shower and made French toast with too much cinnamon. Julian remembered every detail. And he ran from all of it. Why? Because love, true, messy, all-consuming love, was unpredictable. And unpredictable didn't fit into his empire. He was building an image, a brand, a dynasty. And Amelia was the one thing that couldn't be managed. She saw through him. Not the headlines. Not the Forbes covers. Him. And that terrified him. So he did what terrified men do. He vanished. But standing there now, decades of success behind him, a little girl staring at him with a ring she should never have known, Julian felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Regret. Not the kind that lingers in idle thoughts, but the kind that grabs you by the throat and demands answers. He thought Amelia would move on. She deserved to. He pictured her in Paris, in Florence, with someone better. Someone who stayed. But now she was here. Not across the world. Not lost to time. Here at his gala. Holding a secret he never imagined existed. And the worst part? He saw no rage in her face. No resentment. Only resolve. Julian Hart has a daughter, he thought. But the words didn't feel real. He looked back down at the girl. She smiled, innocently, the way children do when they drop bombs and don't know it. You have nice hair, she said. Mom says mine looks like yours when I sleep in late. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was undeniable. For the first time in over a decade, Julian felt fear. Not of bankruptcy. Not of scandal. But of what might happen if that little girl walked out of his life without knowing who he was. Or worse, what might happen if she already did. Julian took a step forward. Then another. But each movement felt heavier than the last, as if the marble beneath him had turned to wet cement. She hadn't moved. Amelia stood at the far edge of the ballroom, her hands resting lightly at her sides, shoulders pulled back, eyes locked on him like a weapon she refused to lower. 10 years ago, she would have run to him. Wrapped her arms around his waist. Buried her face in his chest and laughed that nervous laugh she saved just for him. No? She didn't even blink. He reached the edge of the crowd, where the music began to blur and voices fell away. Their eyes met. And for a moment, just a breath, the world collapsed back into that tiny Brooklyn apartment where they had once made pasta at midnight and danced barefoot to old records. But time has a cruel sense of rhythm. And the song was over long ago. Julian opened his mouth. Amelia. Her name, once a comfort, now sounded foreign on his tongue. Dry. Desperate. She looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. Not pain. Not surprise. Just vacancy. The kind of emptiness you find only after years of silence. She didn't say a word. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slap him, cry, or ask, why? She simply turned, took her daughter's hand, and walked past him. No pause. No hesitation. Just a mother and a child gliding past a man who used to mean everything. Julian didn't move. He couldn't. Because being yelled at would have been easier. Even rage would have been a gift. But this? Being treated like a stranger by the only woman who ever truly saw him? That was punishment he wasn't ready for. As they disappeared into the corridor, the gala returned to its polished rhythm, clinking glasses, polite laughter, the illusion of control. But Julian stood frozen, surrounded by chandeliers and empty applause. And for the first time in his life, he felt what it meant to lose something money could never buy back. Julian didn't even remember telling his legs to move. One moment he was standing motionless among billionaires and flutes of champagne. The next, he was weaving through corridors like a man possessed. He didn't care who saw. Didn't care what headlines would be written in the morning. All he knew was this: he couldn't let Amelia walk away again. Not this time. The gala doors swung open, and the night air slapped his face with a sudden cold. The sharp scent of city rain lingered in the air, though the ground was dry. He spotted them across the valley loop. Amelia, standing tall, clutching the little girl's hand as she waited for the car. Her back was straight. Her chin high. But even from a distance, he could see it in the way her fingers tightened around her daughter's. She was holding herself together, just barely. He jogged up behind them. Amelia, he said, voice cracking slightly. Please. I just want to talk. She turned, slowly. The streetlight overhead gave her an almost ethereal glow. Beautiful. Controlled. Distant. She looked him in the eye and finally spoke. Now you want to talk? Her voice was calm, but it held a sharp edge, like glass wrapped in velvet. He nodded, breath catching in his throat. Who is she? He asked, glancing down at the girl. Her name is Lila, Amelia replied. She's 6. She loves dinosaurs and hates broccoli. She's learning to ride a bike without training wheels. A pause. Then. And she's your daughter. The world tilted. It shouldn't have been a shock, not really. The resemblance, the ring, the timeline, it all added up. But hearing it aloud was like being hit by a truck and not realizing the damage until you tried to stand. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Amelia stared at him, jaw tightening. Tell you. She repeated, as if the words were absurd. You vanished, Julian. You erased yourself. I didn't even know what continent you were on. He opened his mouth, but she kept going. Do you know what it's like to sit in a doctor's office, alone, 6 weeks pregnant, wondering whether to call someone who made it very clear he didn't want to be found? He flinched. I made a mistake, he said quietly. I was scared. We all were, she said. I just didn't have the luxury of running from it. Silence fell between them. Only the sound of tires on asphalt. the click of high heels behind them, the occasional honk in the distance. Then Lila tugged gently at Amelia's hand. "Mommy, can we go?" Amelia gave Julian one final look. Not angry. Not forgiving. Just final. "I don't need anything from you, Julian." Neither does she. Then she turned, helping Lila into the back seat. Julian stood frozen as the car pulled away. No tears. No screams. No second chances. Just the echo of a goodbye that had started 10 years ago and finally finished tonight. Julian didn't move. Not when the taillights disappeared into the blur of downtown traffic. Not when a valet cautiously asked if he needed a ride. Not even when a gust of wind blew the gala program from his hand and down the marble steps. He stood there, alone, in the suit tailored for power, suddenly realizing it couldn't shield him from the one thing he never planned for. Loss. He had built skyscrapers that kissed the sky. Acquired companies like chess pieces. Silenced rivals with a handshake and a smile. But none of it, prepared him for the weight of watching his daughter drive away without knowing who he truly was. The truth wasn't that she didn't recognize him. It was that Amelia had made sure she never had to. That was her protection. That was her revenge. A decade ago, Julian had believed that leaving was mercy. That sparing her the chaos of his world was a kindness. That silence would cause less damage than honesty. He was wrong. Amelia hadn't needed a ghost. She needed a partner. And Lila had deserved a father. He walked slowly toward the curb, the night colder now. His reflection caught in the black sheen of a luxury car window. But he barely recognized the man looking back. Not Julian Hart the mogul. Not Julian Hart the brand. Just a man. Flawed. Fractured. Alone. He could fight now, lawyers, paternity, all of it. He could demand access. Force the issue. But deep down, he knew. He hadn't earned that right. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He let her go once. And tonight, he let her go again. But this time, not because he didn't care. This time, because he finally did. And in the quiet that followed, he made a vow to himself. Not to win her back. Not to fix what he broke overnight. But to become the kind of man worth remembering, even if the woman he once loved never looked back.